Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, staring at the massive alien ship floating in space ahead of them. The vessel looked like a giant metal snake with sharp edges and dark green lights running along its sides. After 3 months of traveling through deep space, this was humanity's first contact with an alien race. Rex, his German shepherd, sat beside his chair with alert brown eyes. The dog had been with Jake for 5 years, through countless missions across the solar system. Rex was not just a pet but a working member of the crew, trained to detect dangerous chemicals and help with security. "Captain, they're responding to our communication," said Lieutenant Danny Carter from his station. His golden retriever, Bella, lay quietly at his feet. Both dogs had been unusually restless since the alien ship appeared on their sensors 2 hours ago. The main screen flickered and suddenly Jake was looking at a face that belonged in nightmares. The alien had scales instead of skin, yellow eyes with narrow pupils like a snake and rows of sharp teeth. When it spoke, its voice came through the translator as smooth and cold. "I am High Commander Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire," the creature said. "We greet you, humans of Earth. We have traveled far to meet your kind." Jake stepped forward, trying to hide his nervousness. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel New Horizon. Welcome to our space. We come in peace and hope for friendship between our peoples." The alien's mouth curved in what might have been a smile, but it looked more like a threat. "How interesting. You bring animals with you into space. Are these your servants?" Rex growled low in his throat. Jake placed a calming hand on the dog's head. "These are our companions. Dogs have worked alongside humans for thousands of years. They're intelligent, loyal, and help us in many ways." High Commander Vextar's yellow eyes focused on Rex, then on Bella. Something that sounded like laughter came from the alien's throat. "Companions? How primitive. We use our creatures for hunting and war, not friendship." Commander Lisa Brooks, the ship's science officer, stepped up beside Jake. She had been studying alien contact protocols for years and knew this moment could shape humanity's future. "We would be honored to learn about your civilization, High Commander. Perhaps we could arrange a cultural exchange." "Indeed," Vextar replied. "We are curious about your world, your defenses, your population centers. For peaceful purposes, of course." The way he said peaceful made Jake's skin crawl, but the captain pushed down his doubts. Over the next 3 days, delegations from both ships met in the New Horizons main conference room. The Zephyrians asked detailed questions about Earth's military strength, how many people lived on each continent, and what weapons humanity possessed. They seemed particularly interested in Earth's orbital defenses and the locations of major cities. Jake noticed that the aliens always laughed when they saw Rex and Bella. During one meeting, a Zephyrian officer named Subcommander Crixtal brought up humanity's animals again. "Your creatures are weak," Crixtal said, watching Rex sniff around the room. "Our Korthak beasts are twice the size of your largest dogs. They have claws that can cut through metal and acid that melts flesh. They hunt in packs and show no mercy to their prey." Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster, the ship's security chief, bristled at the insult. "Our dogs are trained for intelligence work, not killing. They can track scents across miles, detect explosives, and work with humans as partners." "Partners?" Vextar repeated, that cold laughter in his voice again. "How quaint. We prefer our beasts to know their place." Rex had been lying quietly beside Jake's chair, but suddenly the dog stood up and stared directly at Vextar. The German shepherd's ears were forward, his body tense. Bella also rose from her spot near Danny, both dogs focused on the alien commander, with an intensity that made the humans in the room uncomfortable. "Your animals seem distressed," Vextar observed. Perhaps they recognized their superiors, but Jake noticed something else. Both dogs were not showing fear or submission. Their body language suggested they were evaluating a threat like they did when encountering dangerous wildlife on unexplored planets. Rex's nose twitched constantly, and Bella's head tilted as if she was listening to something the humans couldn't hear. Dr. Sarah Kim, the ship's medical officer, had been taking biological readings of the aliens throughout their stay. She approached Jake privately after the third day of meetings. "Captain, I'm picking up some unusual chemical signatures from our guests," she said quietly. "Their scent markers are similar to Earth reptiles. But there's something else. Something that triggers fear responses in mammals." "What do you mean?" Jake asked, scratching Rex behind the ears. The dog pressed closer to his captain, something he rarely did during duty hours. "I think they're natural predators of creatures like our dogs," Sarah explained. "Their species might have evolved to hunt pack animals. That would explain why Rex and Bella are so on edge." Jake filed this information away but continued with the diplomatic meetings. Humanity needed allies in the galaxy, and the Zephyrians claimed to control 3 star systems. Their technology was clearly advanced, and they spoke of other alien races they had encountered. On the final day, High Commander Vextar made his offer. "We propose an alliance between our peoples. We will share our knowledge of other species in this region of space. In return, we ask only for detailed maps of your solar system and defensive capabilities." Jake hesitated. Something felt wrong about the request, but he couldn't identify what. Amy Foster caught his eye and shook her head slightly. She had been reviewing the aliens' questions and noticed they focused heavily on military weaknesses rather than cultural exchange. "We appreciate your offer," Jake said carefully. "However, I'll need to consult with Earth Command before sharing such sensitive information." Vextar's yellow eyes narrowed. "Of course. We understand caution. We will return to our territory and await your decision. But do not take too long, Captain Morrison. The galaxy can be dangerous for unprepared species." The threat was subtle but clear. Jake maintained his diplomatic smile while his hand moved to rest on Rex's head. The dog's fur was standing up along his spine. As the Zephyrian delegation prepared to leave, Sub-Commander Crickstall made one final comment. "Enjoy your pets while you can, humans. In the vast galaxy, only the strong survive. Your soft hearts and weak creatures will be your downfall." Rex barked once, sharp and aggressive. Jake had never heard that particular bark from his dog before. It sounded like a challenge. The Zephyrians departed that evening, their snake-like ship disappearing into the darkness between stars. Jake called a senior staff meeting immediately after their departure. "I don't trust them," Amy Foster said bluntly. "Every question they asked was designed to find our weaknesses. They're not looking for allies. They're gathering intelligence for an invasion." Lisa Brooks nodded in agreement. "Their interest in our population centers and defenses was too specific. Real cultural exchange involves art, science, philosophy. They only cared about military data." Jake looked down at Rex, who was still agitated hours after the aliens left. Bella was the same, both dogs pacing and whining in ways their handlers had never seen before. "Set course for Earth," Jake ordered. "Maximum speed. I want to report this contact immediately and recommend we prepare our defenses." As the New Horizon jumped to faster-than-light travel, Jake didn't know that the Zephyrians had left behind dozens of microscopic surveillance drones. The devices recorded everything about human technology, mapped the ship's weapons, and analyzed the crew's behavior patterns. High Commander Vextar sat in his command chamber, reviewing the intelligence gathered from the human vessel. His officers surrounded him, eager for his assessment. "The humans are weak," Vextar declared. "Their technology is primitive compared to ours. Their military consists of soft creatures who bring pets into battle. Their cities are poorly defended, and their population is scattered across a single world." "What of their animals, Commander?" asked Crickstall. "The creatures seemed unusually alert." Vextar's scaled lips pulled back in a predatory grin. "Pathetic beasts that cannot even hunt their own food. When we release our Korthak packs, on Earth these dogs will flee in terror. The humans will learn what real predators can do." The Zephyrian command ship continued toward the edge of human space, its crew already planning the invasion that would bring another species under their empire's control. They had conquered 12 different civilizations over the past 1,000 years, and humanity would be the easiest yet. None of them suspected that they had just made the greatest mistake in their species' history. They had underestimated not just human determination, but the bond between humans and their four-legged partners. A bond that would soon prove to be far more dangerous than any weapon in the galaxy. 6 months had passed since Captain Jake Morrison's encounter with the Zephyrians. Earth Command had taken his warnings seriously, upgrading defenses and preparing for possible conflict. But when the attack came, it was faster and more brutal than anyone expected. Peter Walsh was reviewing supply reports in his office on Mars Colony 7 when the alarm started screaming. As colony administrator, he had overseen the growth of the settlement from 300 people to over 10,000. Now looking at the sensor displays, he watched helplessly as massive alien ships dropped out of hyperspace directly above the colony. "All security teams to stations," Peter announced over the communication system. "This is not a drill. We are under attack by hostile alien forces." The first wave of Zephyrian dropships landed in the colony's main square. Peter watched from his office window as the ships opened and creatures poured out that made his blood run cold. The Korthak hunting. Beasts were even more terrifying than the aliens had described. Each one stood 7 feet tall on 4 powerful legs with black scales that seemed to absorb light. Their heads were massive, filled with teeth as long as kitchen knives. Acid dripped from their mouths, burning holes in the concrete where it landed. The colony security forces opened fire with laser rifles, but the weapons barely scratched the creatures' thick hides. The Korthak moved with frightening speed, leaping over barriers and tearing through defensive positions like they were made of paper. Peter grabbed his emergency communicator and sent a desperate message to Earth. "Mars Colony 7 under attack. Alien creatures overrunning our defenses. Request immediate assistance." On Earth, General Patricia Hayes received the distress signal in her command center deep beneath the Colorado mountains. She had been expecting this day since reading Captain Morrison's report. But the reality was still shocking. The live video feeds from Mars showed the Korthak systematically hunting down colonists, their hunting instincts making them perfect, killing machines. "Deploy all available ships to Mars," Patricia ordered. "And get me Dr. Kevin Murphy immediately." Dr. Murphy arrived at the command center within minutes, still wearing his lab coat from the Enhanced Animal Intelligence Program facility. For the past 6 months, he had been studying the unusual behavior of military working dogs and civilian pets across Earth. What he had discovered was both fascinating and impossible to explain. "General, you need to see this," Kevin said, pulling up data on his tablet. Every dog on Earth started acting differently the moment those alien ships appeared in our solar system. Military dogs, police dogs, even family pets in suburban homes. They're all exhibiting coordinated behavior patterns we've never seen before. Patricia frowned as she looked at the data. "What kind of patterns?" "Pack formation on a global scale," Kevin explained. "Dogs in New York are responding to signals from dogs in Tokyo. Pets in small towns are positioning themselves at strategic locations around their neighborhoods. It's like they're preparing for something." Before Patricia could respond, another alarm sounded. Reports flooded in from tracking stations around Earth. A massive Zephyrian battle fleet had just entered the solar system, heading directly for Earth. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, now part of Earth's hastily assembled defense fleet. The New Horizon had been retrofitted with heavier weapons and additional armor, but Jake knew they were outgunned and outnumbered. Rex sat beside his captain's chair, but the German shepherd was different now. His eyes held an intelligence that seemed almost human, and he responded to commands Jake hadn't even spoken aloud. "Enemy ships approaching Jupiter," reported Lieutenant Danny Carter. Bella stood next to him, her golden fur seeming to shimmer with energy. Both dogs had been acting strangely for weeks, but today they seemed fully alert and ready for battle. The space battle began as the two fleets met near Jupiter's moons. Human ships fired everything they had at the Zephyrian vessels, while the aliens responded with weapons that could slice through Earth's strongest armor like butter. The New Horizon shook under enemy fire as Jake tried to coordinate his ships' attacks. That's when the first boarding pods hit. "Hull breach on Deck 7, Amy Foster reported from her security station. "Zephyrian boarding parties coming through." Jake grabbed his sidearm and headed for the combat zone, Rex following close behind. They reached Deck 7 just as the alien soldiers broke through the emergency bulkheads. The Zephyrians were fully armored and carried weapons that fired bolts of superheated plasma. But something unexpected happened. Rex didn't wait for Jake's command. The German shepherd launched himself at the lead Zephyrian with a speed and precision that shocked everyone watching. The dog seemed to know exactly where the alien's armor was weakest, targeting joints and gaps with surgical accuracy. More surprising was what happened next. Bella arrived with Danny and 3 other crew members who had brought their dogs. The animals didn't attack randomly like frightened pets. They moved like a military unit, flanking the aliens and coordinating their attacks with hand signals between their human partners. The Zephyrians had expected to face human soldiers. They were not prepared for creatures that could smell their fear, predict their movements, and attack from directions their reptilian brains couldn't anticipate. Within minutes, the entire boarding party was eliminated. Jake stared at Rex in amazement. His dog sat calmly beside him, but Jake could swear he saw battle tactics in those brown eyes. "Good boy," he said softly, but Rex just tilted his head, as if to say the praise wasn't necessary. Similar scenes were playing out across the human fleet. Dogs that had never seen combat were outfighting alien soldiers with centuries of experience. The Zephyrians began reporting impossible losses to their boarding parties. High Commander Vextar watched the battle reports with growing confusion. His Korthak beasts were dominating on Mars, but his elite soldiers were being destroyed by human pets. It made no sense. Sub-Commander Krixtal, explain these losses, Vextar demanded. The Earth creatures fight with unexpected coordination, Krixtal replied nervously. Our soldiers report that the animals seem to communicate with each other across vast distances. They anticipate our tactics before we execute them. Impossible, Vextar hissed. They are primitive beasts. Order the Korthak to be deployed against them. But when the Zephyrians tried to use their hunting beasts against the human dog teams, something even more shocking happened. The mighty Korthak, bred for thousands of years to be the perfect predators, refused to attack. When confronted by Earth's dogs, the alien creatures backed away, whimpering. Dr. Sarah Kim, now assigned to the New Horizons medical bay, was treating wounded crew members when she noticed something extraordinary. An injured soldier had been brought in with his border collie named Ace. The dog was unharmed but seemed to be communicating with other dogs throughout the ship using sounds too subtle for human ears. Kevin, are you seeing this? Sarah said into her communicator to Dr. Murphy back on Earth. I'm seeing it everywhere, Kevin replied. Dogs across Earth are exhibiting behavior that suggests they're operating as a single network. A Chihuahua in Mexico City is somehow coordinating with a St. Bernard in Alaska. It's like they've developed their own communication system. On Earth, the phenomenon was becoming impossible to ignore. Dogs were positioning themselves at key locations around cities, farms, and military bases. They weren't aggressive toward humans, but they watched the skies with an intensity that made their owners nervous. President Helen Clark's corgi, Charlie, had been acting strangely all week. The small dog had never shown interest in military matters, but now he spent hours staring at satellite images of the space battle. When Helen tried to pet him, Charlie would gently move away and return to his vigil. The turning point came during the Battle of Luna Base. The Zephyrians had managed to land troops on humanity's moon base, threatening Earth's primary defense station. Commander Jake Morrison led a desperate counterattack with Rex and a team of human-dog pairs. What happened next would be remembered as the moment everything changed. Rex didn't just fight alongside Jake. The German shepherd seemed to anticipate his captain's tactics, moving to positions before Jake even thought of them. More incredibly, Rex began coordinating not just with the other dogs but with the human soldiers as well. Jake found himself following Rex's lead, trusting the dog's instincts in ways that defied logic. When Rex barked once and looked toward a corridor, Jake knew exactly what it meant. When the dog positioned himself behind cover, Jake understood the tactical advantage immediately. The other human-dog teams showed the same impossible coordination. They moved like a single organism with dozens of minds, each part understanding its role without needing verbal commands. The Zephyrian forces, despite their superior numbers and weapons, were systematically outmaneuvered and defeated. How is This possible? Lieutenant Danny Carter asked as they secured the base. Bella sat beside him, panting but alert, her eyes holding that same impossible intelligence. Jake looked at Rex, who stared back with what could only be described as understanding. "I don't think they're just our pets anymore," Jake said quietly. "I think they're our partners in ways we never imagined." Back on the Zephyrian command ship, High Commander Vextar faced a crisis. 3 weeks after the failed invasion, humanity was still trying to understand what had happened. Every dog on Earth had changed, not just the military working dogs or police canine units, but every single canine from the smallest Chihuahua to the largest Great Dane. They moved with purpose now, their eyes holding intelligence that seemed almost human. Marine Sergeant Tony Rodriguez crouched behind the ruins of a building on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. The Zephyrians had established a forward base here after their retreat, and Earth Command wanted it eliminated. Beside him, Scout, his Belgian Malinois partner, remained perfectly still despite the bitter cold and thin atmosphere of the moon. "You ready for this, boy?" Tony whispered, checking his weapon one more time. Scout turned to look at him, and Tony felt that familiar chill run down his spine. The dog's eyes held knowledge that went beyond normal animal intelligence. Scout understood the mission, the terrain, and the enemy better than some human soldiers Tony had served with. The assault began at dawn. Tony's team of 12 Marines advanced across the frozen landscape, each paired with a dog. But something was different about this mission. The dogs weren't just following their handlers' commands. They were leading. Scout moved ahead of Tony. Using hand signals, the Marine had never taught him to communicate with the other dogs. The Belgian Malinois would pause, tilt his head as if listening to something Tony couldn't hear, then adjust their route. Every change Scout made turned out to be perfect, avoiding Zephyrian patrols and sensor nets that would have detected them otherwise. "How does he know where to go?" whispered Corporal Lisa Hayes, following behind with her German Shepherd, Max. Tony shook his head. "I stopped asking that question. Scout knows things I don't. I just trust him now." The team reached the Zephyrian base perimeter without being detected. The alien facility was heavily defended with automated weapons and energy barriers. Tony started planning their approach when Scout barked once, softly. The other dogs immediately spread out in formation, positioning themselves at specific points around the base. Then something extraordinary happened. The dogs began working together in ways that defied everything Tony knew about animal behavior. Max disabled a sensor array by chewing through cables at exactly the right moment. A border collie named Ranger created a distraction that drew guards away from the main entrance. Scout led Tony directly to a weak point in the perimeter that the Marines' equipment hadn't even detected. Within an hour, the entire Zephyrian base was secured. The alien soldiers inside seemed more confused than defeated. Several Zephyrian prisoners kept staring at the dogs and making nervous clicking sounds in their own language. "They're afraid," Tony realized. "These aliens are actually afraid of our dogs." Back on Earth, the changes were happening everywhere. President Helen Clark watched from her office window as Charlie, her corgi, sat in the rose garden staring at the sky. The little dog had been doing this for days, as if he was watching for something only he could see. Dr. Kevin Murphy's research team had been working around the clock to understand the phenomenon. His laboratory was filled with volunteers and their dogs, all participating in tests that were revealing impossible results. "Dr. Murphy, you need to see this," called Dr. Lisa Chen from across the lab. She was working with a golden retriever named Buddy, whose owner lived in downtown Washington, D.C. Kevin walked over to find Buddy sitting in front of a computer screen displaying satellite images of Earth. The dog was somehow operating the computer interface, scrolling through different views of the planet and focusing on specific locations. "He's been doing this for 20 minutes, Lisa explained. "Watch what happens when I show him images of Zephyrian ship movements." She switched the display to show the positions of alien vessels near the outer planets. Buddy immediately became alert, studied the screen for several seconds, then walked over to a map of Earth on the wall. The dog placed his paw on specific cities and military bases, as if he was coordinating defensive positions. "It's like he understands strategic planning," Kevin said in amazement. But that's impossible. Dogs don't have the brain structure for that kind of abstract thinking. Dr. Mark Thompson, who had been studying brain scans of the changed dogs, looked up from his computer. Kevin, I think we need to reconsider what we know about dog intelligence. These brain scans show activity in regions that were dormant before the alien contact. It's like something awakened parts of their minds that were always there but never used. The most dramatic changes were happening in civilian areas. Dogs were organizing themselves into neighborhood patrol groups, with different breeds taking on specific roles. German Shepherds and Rottweilers handled security, while smaller dogs like Beagles and Jack Russells served as scouts and messengers. In New York City, a pack of street dogs had somehow coordinated with police K-9 units to capture 3 Zephyrian infiltrators who had been hiding in the subway system. The aliens were caught not by human intelligence or technology, but by dogs who could smell their fear and track their movements through the complex tunnel system. Mrs. Betty Johnson, an elderly woman living in suburban Denver, watched in fascination as her elderly basset hound named Winston organized the neighborhood dogs into a defensive formation around her block. Winston had never shown leadership qualities before, but now he was clearly in command of dogs from 6 different houses. It's like they're all talking to each other, Betty told her neighbor. Winston will sit on the porch and make these little sounds, and then all the other dogs in the neighborhood know exactly what to do. The Zephyrians were struggling to understand what they were facing. High Commander Vextar had called for reinforcements from the Draconian Syndicate, but even their most feared creatures were proving ineffective against Earth's dogs. In his command chamber, Vextar reviewed reports from his field commanders. Every single mission involving contact with human dog teams had ended in failure. Worse, his own Korthak hunting beasts were becoming increasingly difficult to control. The creatures refused to hunt, reported Sub-Commander Krickstall. When we try to deploy them against human settlements with dogs present, they hide in their cages and will not come out. What about the void stalkers from our draconian allies? Vextar demanded. They arrived yesterday, Krickstall replied nervously. But when we attempted to test them near a human outpost, something strange happened. The void stalkers could phase through solid matter and remain invisible to all sensors, but the Earth dogs detected them immediately. The creatures were forced to retreat. Vextar's scaled hands clenched into fists. How is this possible? The void stalkers exist partially in subspace. No organic creature should be able to sense them. The answer was becoming clear to human scientists, even if they couldn't fully explain it. The bond between humans and dogs was evolving into something that transcended normal biological relationships. Dogs were not just becoming smarter, they were becoming connected to their human partners in ways that allowed them to share knowledge, instincts, and even tactical thinking. Captain Jake Morrison experienced this firsthand during a reconnaissance mission to one of Saturn's moons. Rex had been acting strangely all morning, constantly looking toward a section of the ship that appeared empty on all sensors. "What is it, boy?" Jake asked, following Rex down a corridor that led to the cargo. Rex stopped at what seemed like an empty section of wall and began growling. Jake pulled out his scanner and found nothing, but he had learned to trust his dog's instincts. He fired his weapon at the seemingly empty space. The energy blast revealed a Zephyrian infiltrator wearing advanced camouflage technology. The alien had been invisible to all human sensors, but Rex had detected him easily. "How did you know?" Jake asked, scratching Rex behind the ears. Rex looked at him with those intelligent brown eyes, and Jake felt something he had never experienced before. For just a moment, it was as if he could sense what Rex was sensing, see through the dog's enhanced perception, and understand the world from a canine perspective. Dr. Sarah Kim, who had been studying the biological changes in both humans and dogs, was beginning to form a theory that seemed impossible, but explained what they were observing. "I think the bonding process is working both ways," she explained to her research team. "Dogs aren't just becoming more intelligent. Humans who work closely with dogs are developing enhanced instincts and sensory abilities. We're not just partners anymore. We're becoming something new together." The evidence was everywhere. Human-dog teams were outperforming pure human units in every measure of tactical effectiveness. They communicated without words, anticipated each other's actions, and seemed to share a level of awareness that made them nearly unstoppable in combat. On Earth, the transformation continued. Charlie, President Clark's corgi, had somehow become the coordination point for dogs across the entire North American continent. Other world leaders reported similar phenomena with their own pets. Dogs were organizing on a global scale, creating networks of communication and cooperation that spanned continents. The Zephyrians attempted one more assault, this time focusing their attack on rural areas where they believed human defenses would be weakest. They deployed their remaining Korthak beasts and Voidstalkers against a small farming community in Kansas. The war had changed everything. What started as humanity defending itself had become something the galaxy had never seen before. Human-dog teams were no longer just fighting on Earth. They were taking the battle to the enemy. Colonel Emma Watson stood on the bridge of the starship Freedom as it approached the Zephyrian homeworld of Kethmore. Her mission was supposed to be impossible: destroy the alien command center that coordinated attacks across 3 star systems. But Emma wasn't worried. She had Max with her. Max was a German Shepherd mix whose intelligence now rivaled that of the ship's tactical computer. The dog sat beside Emma's command chair, his eyes focused on the star charts displayed on the main screen. When Max tilted his head and looked at a specific section of the planet below, Emma knew exactly what he was thinking. "Target that industrial complex," Emma ordered her weapons officer. Max has identified their main command facility. Lieutenant Ryan Brooks, the weapons officer, looked confused. "Colonel, our sensors show that area is mostly empty warehouses." "Trust the dog," Emma said firmly. "He's been right about everything else." The Freedom's guns opened fire on the coordinates Max had indicated. The blasts revealed hidden structures protected by advanced camouflage technology. Secondary explosions showed that Max had found not just any building, but the main communication center for the entire Zephyrian defense network. "How did he know?" Ryan asked in amazement. Emma scratched Max behind the ears. "Dogs can sense things we can't. Electrical fields, chemical signatures, even emotional states. Max isn't just seeing the planet. He's reading it." This was the reality of warfare now. Dogs had become living sensors that could detect hidden enemies, predict ambush locations, and identify weak points in alien technology. More importantly, they could share this information instantly with every other dog in the task force. The assault on Kethmore was unlike anything in military history. Human soldiers worked with their canine partners to infiltrate the planet's defenses, but it was the dogs who led the way. They navigated alien cities like they had been born there, finding paths through defensive networks that human technology couldn't detect. Sergeant Mike Chen crouched behind cover in the ruins of a Zephyrian city with his partner, a border collie named Flash. The dog had been studying the enemy patrol patterns for the past hour, and Mike could feel Flash's understanding flowing into his own mind. They change guard positions every 23 minutes. Mike whispered into his radio, somehow, knowing this information without understanding how. "There's a blind spot near the North Tower that lasts for exactly 90 seconds. His squad moved through the opening Flash had identified, reaching their target without being detected. This kind of tactical awareness was happening across the entire invasion force. Dogs were not just helping their human partners. They were teaching them to see the world through enhanced senses. Back on Earth, the transformation was accelerating. Dr. Kevin Murphy's research team had made discoveries that challenged everything science understood about intelligence and consciousness. "Dogs aren't just getting smarter," Kevin explained to President Helen Clark during a briefing at the White House. "They're connecting to something larger. Every dog on Earth is now part of a network that shares information instantly across vast distances." President Clark looked down at Charlie, her corgi, who was sitting calmly beside her desk. The little dog had been her companion for 3 years, but now he seemed to understand every word of the conversation. "What kind of network?" she asked. "We're not sure," Kevin admitted. "But watch this." He pulled out a tablet showing a live video feed from the battle on Kethmore. "Charlie, can you tell us what Max is seeing right now?" The corgi walked over to a map of the alien planet on the wall and placed his paw on a specific location. Within seconds, Kevin's tablet showed Max leading Colonel Watson's team to that exact spot where they discovered a hidden weapons facility. Charlie is receiving information from a dog that's 20 light years away, Kevin said. Real-time communication across interstellar distances. It should be impossible, but it's happening. Dr. Lisa Chen, who had been studying the brain activity of bonded humans, made an even more startling discovery. The humans are changing too, she reported. People who work closely with dogs are developing enhanced pattern recognition, improved spatial awareness, and what can only be described as intuitive combat abilities. The Zephyrians were facing an enemy they couldn't understand. High Commander Vextar had called in reinforcements from across the Empire, including creatures from the darkest corners of known space. The Draconian Syndicate had sent their most feared weapons, the Void Stalkers. These creatures existed partially in subspace, making them invisible to most sensors and able to phase through solid matter. For centuries, they had been the ultimate assassins, capable of killing enemies who never saw them coming. But on Kethmore, the Void Stalkers encountered something they had never faced before. Earth dogs who could sense their presence across dimensional barriers. Captain Sarah Lewis was leading a demolition team through the underground tunnels beneath the Zephyrian capital when her German shepherd, Rocky, suddenly stopped and began growling at what appeared to be empty air. "Contact front," Sarah called out, raising her weapon toward the empty space Rocky was focused on. Her team thought she had lost her mind until the Void Stalker materialized, forced out of its dimensional hiding place by Rocky's unwavering attention. The creature was massive, with tentacles instead of arms and eyes that glowed with malevolent intelligence. "How did Rocky see it?" asked Corporal Dave Martinez, firing his weapon at the now visible creature. "He didn't see it," Sarah replied, watching as Rocky coordinated with two other dogs to surround the alien. "He felt it. Dogs can sense things that exist between dimensions." The Void Stalker, confused by its exposure, tried to phase back into subspace, but every time it attempted to hide, one of the dogs would focus on its location, somehow anchoring it in normal reality. Within minutes, the creature that had terrorized a dozen star systems was defeated by 3 Earth dogs working together. Dr. Mark Thompson, studying the phenomenon from his laboratory on Earth, was beginning to understand what was happening. "The dogs aren't just detecting these creatures," he explained to his research team. "They're somehow interfering with their ability to exist in multiple dimensions. It's like the dogs are forcing reality to make a choice." The Zephyrians attempted to counter this new threat by studying captured Earth dogs, but their efforts backfired, catastrophically. Dr. Kevtha, their lead scientist, believed he could replicate the human-dog bond with Zephyrian subjects. In his laboratory on the planet Nexor, Dr. Kevtha had captured 6 dogs from various human colonies. He planned to study their neural patterns and create artificial versions for Zephyrian use. But the captured dogs were not helpless prisoners. Within hours of their capture, they had coordinated a complex escape plan. A small beagle named Pip distracted the guards while a Rottweiler named Bruno broke through the containment barriers. A border collie named Sage disabled the security systems using methods that defied explanation. The dogs didn't just escape. They systematically destroyed the research facility from within, eliminating years of Zephyrian scientific data and freeing dozens of other captured creatures from various worlds. When Zephyrian forces arrived to investigate, they found their most secure research facility in ruins and no trace of how the dogs had accomplished such precise destruction. Security recordings showed the animals working with the coordination of trained saboteurs, using tools and technology they should not have been able to understand. "They're not just animals," Dr. Kevtha reported to High Commander Vextar before his own capture by the escaped dogs. "They're something entirely new, a form of intelligence that operates on levels we cannot comprehend." On Earth, the changes continued to accelerate. Dogs were now working directly with human engineers and scientists, contributing to technological innovations that seemed impossible. A group of border collies had somehow helped NASA design faster-than-light communication systems. German shepherds were assisting military strategists in developing battle plans that consistently outmaneuvered alien forces. The most remarkable development was happening in ordinary homes across the planet. Children who grew up with dogs were displaying enhanced problem-solving abilities, spatial intelligence, and emotional awareness. The bond between humans and dogs was creating not just better soldiers, but better people. Mrs. Helen Davis watched, her 8-year-old daughter Amy, playing in the backyard with their family dog, a golden retriever named Sunny. Amy was building complex structures out of blocks, while Sunny seemed to offer suggestions by moving pieces with his nose. "Mom, Sunny says this tower needs to be stronger at the base," Amy called out. "He can feel where the stress points are." Helen had stopped questioning such statements. Amy and Sunny communicated in ways that went beyond normal human-animal interaction. They shared understanding, creativity, and intuition that made them both smarter together than they were apart. Similar scenes were playing out around the world. The human-dog partnership was evolving into something that transcended individual species, creating a form of collective intelligence that the galaxy had never encountered. The final battle began not with weapons or warships, but with every dog on Earth lifting their heads toward the stars at exactly the same moment. From tiny apartments in Tokyo to vast ranches in Montana, millions of canines focused their attention on something invisible to human senses but crystal clear to their enhanced perception. Admiral Lisa Brooke stood on the bridge of the flagship Terra's Hope as the largest Zephyrian fleet in history approached Earth. Her promotion from commander had come after her success in developing new human-dog tactical units. Beside her sat Nova, a black Labrador whose intelligence now surpassed most military computers. "Enemy fleet approaching Jupiter orbit," reported Captain Danny Turner. His golden retriever Belle lay calmly at his feet, but her eyes held the same focused intensity that had become common among all Earth's dogs. Lisa looked down at Nova, and for a moment, she experienced something that still amazed her after months of partnership. She could feel what Nova was sensing, the fear radiating from the alien fleet, the positions of every enemy ship, and most importantly, the location of High Commander Vextar himself. "Nova has identified their command ship," Lisa announced to her tactical team. Third vessel from the left, hidden behind the larger battle cruisers. Lieutenant Commander Alex Stone looked at his sensor readings. "Admiral, our scanners show that ship has the same signature as the others. How can Nova tell the difference?" "Dogs don't just see with their eyes," Lisa explained. "They read emotions, detect stress chemicals, and sense the patterns of command, authority. Nova knows which ship contains their leader because she can feel his fear." The battle began as thousands of ships from both fleets engaged in space combat near Jupiter's moons. But this was unlike any battle in galactic history. Human vessels moved with coordination that seemed impossible, as if guided by a single mind that could predict enemy movements before they happened. On Earth, the phenomenon that scientists still couldn't fully explain was reaching its peak. Every dog on the planet was connected to the battle, sharing information and tactical awareness across impossible distances. A beagle in rural Kansas was somehow providing navigation data to fighter pilots near Europa. German shepherds in Berlin were coordinating defensive strategies with destroyers in the asteroid belt. President Helen Clark watched the battle from the Situation Room, but her attention was focused on Charlie, her corgi. The small dog sat perfectly still, his eyes closed, as if he was concentrating on something incredibly complex. "What's he doing?" asked General Patricia Hayes, who commanded Earth's ground forces. "Charlie is coordinating the entire defense," Dr. Kevin Murphy explained. "Every dog on Earth is connected through him right now. He's processing tactical information from millions of sources and distributing it to our forces in real time." It seemed impossible, but the evidence was overwhelming. Human dog teams across the solar system were operating with perfect coordination, sharing knowledge and awareness that allowed them to outmaneuver the Zephyrian fleet, despite being outnumbered 3-1. The first breakthrough came when Marine Sergeant Tony Rodriguez and his Belgian Malinois scout led a boarding party onto a Zephyrian battleship. But instead of fighting their way through the vessel, Scout led them directly to the ship's main computer core. "How does he know where to go?" asked Corporal Mike Foster, following behind with his German Shepherd ace. "Scout isn't just reading the ship's layout," Tony replied, watching his partner navigate corridors that looked identical to human eyes. "He's reading the crew's thoughts, Dogs can sense where fear is strongest, and aliens are always most afraid near their most important systems. Within minutes, Scout had led them to not just the computer core, but to the exact access panel that would give them control of the entire ship. The dog somehow understood alien technology well enough to identify critical systems by the emotional responses they triggered in the crew. Similar scenes were playing out across the battlefield. Dogs were not just helping their human partners, they were teaching them to see through alien deceptions, detect hidden weapons, and understand enemy psychology in ways that traditional intelligence gathering could never achieve. High Commander, Vextar watched his fleet being systematically destroyed by an enemy that seemed to read his thoughts before he could form them. His tactical displays showed impossible human maneuvers, as if every Earth ship knew exactly where his forces would be before they arrived. Sub-Commander Krixtal, report. Vextar commanded from his bridge. Our forces are being outmaneuvered. At every turn, Krixtal replied, his voice filled with confusion and fear. The humans anticipate our strategies before we implement them. It's as if they can see the future. What Vextar didn't understand was that the humans weren't seeing the future. They were reading the present with senses that his species had never developed. Dogs could detect the stress chemicals, electrical patterns, and behavioral cues that revealed alien intentions before those intentions became actions. On the flagship Terra's Hope, Nova suddenly stood up and walked to the navigation console. The Labrador placed her paw on a specific section of the star chart, then looked directly at Admiral Brooks. Nova wants us to move to those coordinates, Lisa announced. All ships, follow my lead. Admiral, that position puts us directly in the enemy's line of fire, Captain Turner warned. Trust the dog, Lisa said firmly. She's been right about everything else. The human fleet moved to the position Nova had indicated, seeming to expose themselves to devastating enemy fire. But at the exact moment the Zephyrian weapons charged to fire, every dog in the human fleet focused their attention on the alien command ship. What happened next would be remembered as the moment that changed galactic warfare forever. High Commander Vextar, preparing to order the destruction of the human fleet, suddenly experienced something his species had never felt before. He became the hunted instead of the hunter. The combined focus of millions of Earth dogs, somehow transmitted through space itself, hit Vextar's consciousness like a physical blow. For the first time in his life, the Zephyrian commander felt what it was like to be prey. The sensation was so overwhelming that he collapsed on his bridge, unable to function. What is happening to me? Vextar gasped, clutching his scaled head as waves of primal fear washed over him. His crew was experiencing the same phenomenon. Every Zephyrian in the fleet suddenly felt the attention of Earth's dogs focused on them like a spotlight in their minds. They weren't just being hunted. They were being evaluated, measured, and found wanting by a form of intelligence they couldn't comprehend. The Zephyrian fleet began to break apart. Ships fled in all directions as their crews lost the will to fight. The mighty Korthak hunting beasts, locked in their transport vessels, cowered in their cages, and refused to come out. Even the Void Stalkers retreated permanently into subspace, too terrified to return to normal reality. All ships cease fire, Admiral Brooks ordered as the enemy fleet scattered. Let them run. They've learned their lesson. But the lesson was far from over. As the Zephyrian ships fled toward the edge of the solar system, they carried something with them that would change their empire forever. The knowledge that they were no longer the apex predators of the galaxy. On Earth, the celebration was quiet, but profound. Dogs across the planet wagged their tails and returned to playing with their human families. But something fundamental had changed. The bond between humans and their canine companions had evolved into something that made both species stronger than they had ever been alone. Dr. Sarah Kim published her final research report 6 months after the battle. We didn't just domesticate dogs, she wrote. We became something greater together. A species that fights not for dominance but for love. Not for conquest, but for protection of what we care about. Children who grew up with dogs were showing enhanced empathy, problem-solving abilities, and emotional intelligence. Adults who worked with canine partners reported feeling more connected not just to their dogs, but to other humans as well. The human-dog bond was creating better people. In veterinary clinics around the world, dogs were helping heal not just their own injuries, but those of their human partners. Police dogs were solving crimes by reading emotional residues that human forensics couldn't detect. Search and rescue dogs were finding lost people by following trails of hope and desperation that existed beyond physical scent. President Clark's final address to the nation included Charlie sitting beside her podium. "We learned that our greatest strength was never our technology or our weapons," she said, scratching behind the corgi's ears. "Our strength is our ability to form bonds that transcend species, to love without reservation, and to fight not for ourselves but for those we protect." The Zephyrian Empire collapsed within a year. The species that had once dominated 3-star systems found themselves unable to maintain control when their subject peoples learned about the human-dog partnership. Rebellions began on every world, led by beings who wanted to experience the kind of bond they had witnessed between humans and their companions. Other alien civilizations began approaching Earth not as potential conquerors, but as students. They wanted to understand how two different species could become something greater, together.